Lovely to be here with everyone finally. Feels like it's been a long time coming, and I hope everyone has had a fantastic conference so far. I'm going to kick off by saying thank you to OCD Action and the BDD Foundation for having me here. Both charities do incredible work. OCD Action has always been one that's been really close to my heart, and has always been one that every time I've engaged with, I've gained from. So I'm super proud to be here, and I hope for those of you that are new to either charity, I hope you have a bit more of a delve into what each charity does, and for those of you that are long-term experienced working with both charities, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about already. So without further ado, first and foremost as well, one of the reasons why, as Charlie mentioned there, I do quite a bit of public speaking. I'm really privileged to speak at a lot of fantastic organisations. I talk a lot about mental health in the workplace, I talk about mental health in schools, mental health at university, and all sorts of other platforms. But one of the reasons why it means so much to be here as well is that as someone that grew up with OCD from a very young age, and I'll tell you all about that in a moment, you guys always feel like my people. So whenever I'm at an event for OCD Action, or I'm speaking to people that have OCD or BDD or related conditions, it always feels like we are talking to, we're singing from the same hymn sheet. So it's fantastic to be here. So I'm going to take you all the way back to 1996 to start with. Very similar to right now, there was a Euros going on. Euro 96 was going on. Paul Gascoigne was doing the business. The Spice Girls were massive, and mobile phones were even larger. And I was 6 years old. I was sort of a regular 6-year-old, I would say. Maybe people that went to school with me wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but I always felt like I was quite a normal 6-year-old. I was massively interested in football. I was riding my bike till all hours, and I was always coming in just before it became dark. So I was just your sort of quintessential 6-year-old, really. I did have a lot going on at home. My brother was really unwell. He passed away when I was 8, so we'd had quite a lot going on in the family at that stage. I had quite a lot of pressure at home, and it was a little bit of a melting pot for pressure sometimes. But I'm going to take you back to when I first started to experience what I now know as OCD. When I was 6, this wasn't something that I understood as being OCD, but now that I'm older, I do. I see it as so. I was, for those of you that have heard me speak before as well, I tell this story quite a bit. I think for those of you that are listening, you might relate to this. You might have a very different sort of almost origin story to how things worked for you, but hopefully the way I've explained this might give you a little idea of how it was for me. So I was 6 years old, walking to school, and school was only at the end of the road as well. So my mum could stand outside and she could look down. I could walk to school now and feel like I was a big boy. As I was walking down the road, I saw this big stone in the road. Not like a rock, just like a big stone, really. But everything was big to me. I was 6 and 2 foot nothing. And I had this immediate urge, like this overwhelming, overpowering feeling to go and move that stone. So it wasn't something I'd really experienced before, but I started to feel a little bit anxious. I started to feel a little bit overwhelmed. My chest started to beat a little faster. Felt like I was sweating, and I didn't really know what that was for. At that sort of age, I'd have probably thought I just wasn't feeling very well. I then walked 10, 15 yards beyond that point, and I started to think, I need to move that stone, because if I don't move that stone, something bad will happen. And I have some specifics as to what the bad things was, but we won't go into them now. I'm sure for those of you that live with intrusive thoughts, you'll definitely know what I'm talking about. But I was walking along, I had this feeling just start to grow. Something bad's going to happen unless I move that stone. So I'm walking with it 25 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, and it just starts to grow. My anxiety starts to grow. I get myself to school. It's just down the end of the road. Get myself to school. I'm sitting in there. It's the first lesson. I remember it really well. It was a maths lesson, and my anxiety is just rising. And again, I'm 6 years old. It's not something I'm totally used to, but it's raising. I just don't feel right. What I ended up doing, not being able to cope with that obsession, was I legged it out of the school. I ran to where that stone was, I moved the stone to the side of the road, and then I felt an immediate, okay, I feel better. And I thought I'd sorted it, and that was that. And that's just the story about the stone. A weird part of my day, something I hadn't experienced before, but that was it. But now, as an adult and as someone that understands particularly obsessive compulsive disorder, I understand that the the thoughts I was having there was my first obsessions, or the first obsessions that I can remember, and the going and moving the stone to avoid the bad thing happening was my first example of compulsion. So that always feels like quite a formative example to me. Lots of you will maybe feel something similar for you, but for me, it started around that sort of age. Between 6 and 14, things were fairly normal. It was a fairly normal sort of life. I could deal with my anxiety quite comfortably. I could deal with being what felt like just a bit of a strange kid quite well. Until I got to high school, I got to about 13, 14, and everything just started to plummet for me. My mental health started to really go down. My confidence went, my self-esteem went, and every day felt like I was just in a washing machine. It was like it was just throwing me around. I didn't have control over anything. I constantly felt anxious. I couldn't control myself, and it was just a really, 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 really difficult period. Between sort of 14 and leaving high school, I left high school a little bit early, but between that sort of time, OCD became the dominant part of my world, really. And I'm sure for those of you with OCD and BDD, you can relate to that. And I know for a lot of people, that sort of age is a fairly normal time to be really experiencing similar feelings to what I had there. So I was constantly just feeling like I was behind everything. I constantly felt like everyone was doing things that I couldn't do or wouldn't do. People were going to parties, people were playing football matches, people were doing five-a-side in the evenings, people were planning trips, they were going on trains, they were going on holiday with their friends for the weekend, they were doing all of these things that felt like what being 14 was, or what 14 had been promised to me to be, and I wasn't experiencing it. I couldn't go anywhere, I couldn't enjoy things when I was there, and I felt completely like my peers were just running past me. I felt like I was staying 14 and they were becoming 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, miles and miles ahead of me. So it was a really difficult time. It was a really incredibly difficult period. I know obviously so far, bear with me, I know so far I've given you quite the negative take on it, but I also want to be realistic with everyone here, and I don't want to ever patronize anyone, particularly younger people, and try and make it sound like it's a bed of roses, because it isn't. So I was always looking at other people constantly. For me, it was always a case of what my mates were doing, how they were, what they judged success as, the things that they could do on their own, the things they could do without parental support. It was always a thing for me. And I always think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make in human life, really, is setting our standards by other people and setting what we consider to be the right way of doing things by other people. If you go on any sort of social media or any sort of website like a BuzzFeed or whatnot, and you'll always see, there'll always be lists, and there'll be lists of people that, you know, made it after 40. As someone that's 31 as well, I always go for the ones that are over 40 and not over 30 now. But they always have these lists, and they always mention the same people, and they mention the same sort of stories. You know, it will be Alan Rickman, the Snape from Harry Potter, didn't have his first film till he was after 40. Samuel L. Jackson didn't have his first film till after 40. Colonel Sanders, the guy that started KFC, didn't franchise the company until he was in his 60s and make millions. And the moral of the story is always to not judge your story by someone else's. The moral of the story is always to define how you do things on your own terms. Even when it's dealing with something negative, or when it's dealing with something like a mental health condition, it's always, we always look at that sort of story and that moral in an entertainment sense or in a making money sense, but we don't tend to look at it in a mental health sense. We don't tend to look at that and think to ourselves, well, you know what, this person might have experienced this, or they might have had therapy for this condition, or they might have gone through that or gone through this, and they're in a better position to me. They're in a different position, but they're not in a better position. And I think that's a really important thing for us to get our head around. I think that's a really, really, really big part of how I found my version of recovery, was because I stopped putting finish lines into things. I stopped saying to myself at 14, well, I need to be well by 15, because if I'm not well by 15, I won't be ready for my GCSEs. And then my GCSEs come around, and I thought to myself, well, I need to be well by 16 because I'll be leaving school, as I could at that time. I need to be well by 18 because I'll be an adult. I need to be well by 19 because people are going to expect this from me or that from me. And one of the things that I always urge people, and particularly younger people, to do is to bin that feeling of how other people's story is and how it relates to yours exactly. It doesn't. It's really good to listen to the story like mine or anyone else's that maybe has OCD or BDD, and to maybe pick some things that are relevant to you, or to feel that sense of community, which is obviously a big part of what the conference is about today. But sometimes it can be to a point where it actually stops us moving forward. So I started to remove those finishing lines, and I started to really banish them from my life. And then I made the decision to banish them when I got to about 22. I said to myself, I'm going to get well. I'm going to try and get well. I'm going to engage, but I'm going to do it my own way. I'm going to do it I'm going to beat my own drum. It's going to be about me. I'm the only one that matters here. And it's only going to be down to the way that I view this, if it's successful or not. And it was one of the most successful changes of mindset that I've had. And it was probably the catalyst for recovery for me, or what my version of recovery is. I keep mentioning my version of recovery, and I'm going to jump into that a little bit later on about why I use the term my version of recovery. So I got to 22. I'd started getting rid of these finishing lines. I was engaging with charities. I was speaking to OCD Action. And actually, I saw on the OCD Action website an advert for a TV show called Extreme OCD Camp that was starting up. And it was going to be taking 6 young British, like teens and early 20s people, to America, to the American wilderness, to take part in ERP therapy. So exposure, response, prevention therapy. And you can read a lot about that on both charities' websites. So I saw that as a great opportunity to get some therapy quickly. I was on quite a long waiting list at that time. It was a great chance to get some therapy quickly. It's a great chance to build a bit of a peer support group, even though at the time I wasn't quite convinced that would be the right move for me, but I thought it was a chance to give it a try. And also a really important thing to me was to show OCD for what it really was. I felt like people didn't really have an idea as to how OCD really affected people. They didn't understand the severity, and they maybe just had a little bit of an idea from seeing things on TV. And that didn't really feel like it was right for me. This felt like it was the right move. So I applied. They asked me to take part in the TV show, which was amazing. And I went and, with 5 other people, took part in the most intense experience of my life. So not only was I doing therapy, which is already an intense experience, it was, but I had 4, 5, 6 massive cameras in my face at all times. And for anyone that knows me, I like the sound of my own voice. So that seems to be an okay compromise for me. But it gave me a really good chance to show what OCD really was, whilst also engaging in this therapy. So it would be an understatement to say that it was the best decision of my life, because it absolutely was. And again, I'm going to talk about engagement a bit later on, but it's a version of engagement. And that was my version of engagement. I was trying to do things. I was trying to move things forward. So we went there. It was an incredible experience. We would support each other through the whole thing. I would do an exposure, and then there would be 2 teammates for me that would be there to just support me through it. And a lot of the time, we wouldn't even really talk about the exact thing that was going on. It was just nice to know they were there. I would be doing a specific type of therapy, and then I would just have 2 of my mates just standing very close, and I just knew they were there to be part of it. The show was pretty successful, a few million viewers. We was invited to do shows like Good Morning Britain, or This Morning, BBC Breakfast. We all did lots of different radio. We all did lots of different magazines and newspapers, which my nan has absolutely every single clipping about that show. So if you ever need to see it, that's where it is. And it was an amazing experience. They edited it really well. It really showed how OCD was, and the therapy itself was amazing. And a big part of why the therapy was so good was because even though I had these other people around me that all had OCD, I wasn't judging how things was going for me by them. I was judging how things was going by my own measures of success. It wasn't a case of, well, they've done that today, or he's done this today, so why can't I do that? Instead, it was a case of, okay, no, I just want to be moving forward a little bit each day. And some days I'll step back, but if I can keep moving forward, that's where I need to be. So I was there. I had all these great mates around me. I had some fantastic therapists. I had an incredible opportunity. But one of the big things that was working for me was that I was no longer going by anyone else's standards. So I wasn't looking at it as, am I going to be the most improved person here? Am I going to get to this stage or this stage? Instead, it was always just self-defined ways of doing things. So the pressure to get better to a certain level, or to be a certain type of recovery, completely dissipated, and I no longer felt it. I was no longer having to be stuck in that worry. So that was one of the biggest changes for me. I took the pressure completely away, and it made all the difference. And it takes me onto the pressure of being young as well, being a younger person. So I'm 31 now, as I say, so I'm still mostly a younger person, but I'm talking, I suppose, for under 25s here. There's an expectation and then there's a reality of how being young is. And I'm going to let you in on a secret that no one seems to talk about. And it baffles me that this isn't something that we talk about more often, but being young is hard work. Being 14, being 20, being 25, whatever, is really, really hard work. Since March last year with the pandemic, of course, it's even harder, but it's a tough time. Things are changing, lots of things are happening in your life. You're finding yourself, you're finding what you like, you're having lots of pressure normally with school or university or work, or the pressure of engaging in those things. There's lots of things that become really, really, really difficult. So what we tell younger people is we tell them that it's the best years of their life. And for some of you, and for some people, it absolutely will be. But for lots, it isn't. And that's fine. Because for me, as someone that's past that now, I wouldn't want the best years of my life to be the ones that were behind me anyway. I don't want to have a nostalgic view of the best years of my life. I want them to be something that's in front of me. I want the best years of my life to be the ones that are ahead of me. And what I can tell you is, and again, this is something that we tend to not talk about enough when we get past being younger, being older has a lot less challenges that being younger does when it comes down to mental health, I would say. You have bills, you have work concerns, you have all these sort of things that we talk about and that we consider to be the be all and end all of how difficult we judge life. But a lot of the time when people say those sort of things, it just makes it more difficult for younger people. So in reality, being young is difficult, and that's something that we should appreciate. So I want to give you a couple of things that was really, really important to me and that I would have done differently if I knew what I know now, if I would have been in your shoes. So first and foremost, I would have tried to have understood that one type of therapy isn't the be all and end all. Just because a therapy doesn't work once doesn't mean it won't ever work. If you do CBT, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy, if you do that and it doesn't work, it doesn't mean CBT doesn't work. CBT does work. It's gold standard. It's lots of professionals around the world swear by it, and there's lots of reasons they do swear by it. For me, when I was younger, I used to think, I've tried CBT, it doesn't work. I've tried ERP, it doesn't work. I've tried this type of therapist, it doesn't work. I've tried this type of counseling, it doesn't work. I really wish I wouldn't have done that, and I think it held me back. So what I would say is, if you have tried a certain type of therapy and you feel like it's not worked for you, there's ways to work out if it can work for you, but don't completely discount it. There's not one route to your version of recovery. There's absolutely not one route. It's not just a case of you have maybe medication, certain type of therapy, and then you're better. For some people, it might be the first. For some people, it might be the second. For some people, it might be a combination of a lot of them. I always refer to it as a mentally healthy diet. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about how sometimes you might go to a doctor and they'll say, make sure you're exercising. And when you're really, really struggling with your mental health, that can be something that can make you feel terrible. I need more than exercise. But for me, and the way I view things now, exercise might be 1% of me getting better, so it's worth trying. So it's not just one route. The next thing that I wish I'd done would be kinder to myself. Simple as that. I wasn't very nice to myself. I set standards for myself that weren't fair. And when I didn't hit these self-imposed difficult standards, I felt rubbish and I felt like I had done something wrong. So I'd be kind to myself. And then the last thing would be engage. If you can, this is a community week. We're talking about community here. There's lots of great things that both charities do. We have the OCD Foundation has their e-helpline. They have their structured support groups. OCD Action has peer support groups, has a phone, has a helpline. Just try and engage with the charity if you need to, engage with your GP, engage with family and friends, engage with school, engage with university and work, all of these types of things. So they would be my 4 big takeaways of things I wish I'd done differently. Understood that just because something didn't work once doesn't mean it can't ever work. Understand that the route that we take is different for everyone. Understand that we need to be kinder to ourselves. We're already going through something difficult. There's no point in making ourselves feel worse about it. And the 4th one, a really important one, is to engage as much as we can with people. Talking about what people expect of young people as well, people can sometimes look down at younger people and talk about them as if they are as if they are lesser or worse, or it's the worst group yet, or there's no respect, or all of these sort of things that you hear people say sometimes. That is not my experience. I speak to a lot of young people, and I think you're the best generation yet. I say this very, very regularly. It's an empathetic group, it's passionate, it's progressive, it's collaborative. And I think knowing that, and knowing that you're a part of that, your peers and the people around you are some of the most understanding when it comes to mental health, and also some of the most willing to learn as well, is really, really important. When I was 14, some of my friends didn't really want to hear some things to do with mental health, but that's changed. When I was 14, some teachers maybe didn't quite get things, but that's started to change. There's been massive changes in that. GPs, massive changes, all sorts of medical professionals, that has started to move forward. So this is the generation I would choose to be in, is yours. It's the one that I would like to be in. So recovery. I keep saying about my version of recovery, but what is recovery? So when we think of recovery, I think we imagine sort of dramatic versions of what recovery is. We think of cures. We might see on TV, we might see in books, we might see in films, we might see a main character that ends up being symptomless. And it's difficult because, again, they're trying to condense these things into entertainment purposes. But when we think of these things, I think a lot of times when people say recovery, they think cure. They think it means purely that it's gone. And that was something that always put a lot of pressure on me. So I would be getting better. I would be making changes. I'd be getting 10, 15, 20% better. And then I would realize that, but I'm not completely cured. So obviously I can't be getting better. And that was a really difficult, really toxic, really negative way of looking at it. One thing that I've come to understand is that recovery is not just it's not a line. You don't have a Tuesday that you're not in recovery, and then you have a Wednesday and all of a sudden you are in recovery. That's not how it works. So recovery can also be something that sometimes just surprises us. It can almost just, one day you can be sitting there and realizing, you know what, I have so many more good days than bad days now. So recovery is not always what we think it is. My version of recovery, and the reason why I say my version of recovery is because, again, I judge it by my own standards. I try and view my version of recovery by realistic targets, definable success, something that's personal as well, and then trying to merge all of those things, really. So I try and look at what I can view recovery to be. So for me, there was, I always wanted recovery to be that I could eat out in public and people wouldn't tell that I had OCD. That was always something that was really important to me. So I could then set my goals around that specific thing. I didn't have to set them by anyone else. And it took a little bit of pressure away, and it meant that I could set that bar as to what I deemed recovery to be. And that's something that I massively, massively urge all of you to consider looking at. Set your own versions of what recovery is, because it's you that lives in that version of recovery. So if you have a line that you want to get past, that you want to slowly start to move past, and then you want to consider that as your version of recovery, perfect. That's what recovery is to you. And I love that, and that's how we should view it. So for you, that might be, you want to be able to go to a job interview. You want to be able to eat out with family, similar to mine. You might want to be able to have a weekend off where you're enjoying relaxing more than worrying about OCD or BDD or your mental health. I think learning to set those lines becomes a really defining moment in stepping forward for you. Rather than just, I want to be recovered, I want to be over that line of what I consider recovery to be. Setting the lines by your own standards is a massive, massive, massive tool for you in moving forward. One thing I would say is as well, that all of the tools that you need to move forward and to find your version of recovery, they already exist. They're already there. So many great therapies exist. So many great different ways of moving forward, they already exist. So finding how you can set realistic targets, define the success so you know that you're moving forward, and having it something personal to you is a really, really great way forward. One of the ways that can really, one of the ways that can really develop, and one of the things that can supercharge that a little, would be to build your own squad. So these can be what I refer to as supporters. They can be people around you, they can be family members, they can be friends, they can be people at school, they can be people at work, they can be lots of different things. They can include your medical professionals, having these teams around you. If you can start, and it's a very difficult thing, but if you can start to build these squads and build these people around you that are your teammates in recovery. They might be people you meet through the charity, through either charity, through events with the charities. If you can start to build those teammates, and if you can start to have them on your side and to have them as a part of every single time that you're doing something that's difficult, or every single time that you feel like you're having a bad day, you know, even if you're not speaking to them about it, there's these 8, 9, 10 people that are around you that want to be a part of supporting you and that want to see things go right for you, then it can be an incredible positive. I had that when I was in America, when we was doing Extreme OCD Camp. I had these 5 people, they were on my team. We didn't speak about OCD an awful lot, but I knew they were there. They knew as much as I wanted them to know, and that's great for you. They could share as much information as necessary. I could share as much information as necessary with them, but it meant that we was all together. It was all a part of it. I had that squad. Now, getting towards the last minute or two, so I just want to talk to you about how I view recovery now. We spoke earlier about, or how I view my life now, sorry, in my version of recovery. We spoke earlier about how they're about TV and films, books, and the way that recovery is and those things. The one thing I would say is it's better than that. It's absolutely better than that, and it's more realistic. It's not just a case of, I'm not spending every single day completely loving every single part of my life. That's not how recovery looks. I don't spend every single day just thinking that this is the best day of my life. I'm not smiling the whole time. That's just not the way it works. Instead, recovery for me is so much better because I enjoy the small things. When I go out for a coffee with my friends, I enjoy it. I'm relaxed, I'm enjoying it. OCD might still be a part of my life for me. I might still feel certain things with it. I might still have intrusive thoughts, but the way I deal with them is completely different. So the thing I want to sign off with is that recovery is so much better than you'd hope it would be. So much better, but it's quite different. It's a little bit more realistic. It's a little bit less film quality, but it's so much better. It's so much more vibrant. My life's become incredibly vibrant, and I love every single part of it. I love being able to talk to people like yourselves, and I'm so grateful that you would listen to me today. I wish every single one of you all the best in finding your version of recovery, and thank you for listening today.